Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 23rd Singapore Writers' Festival and our inaugural digital edition. It is my pleasure to open this year's festival, which brings together homegrown and international literary talents in their shared love for writing. SWF is the pinnacle event for literary arts in our arts and culture calendar. It is also recognized as one of Asia's premier literary events. The theme for this year's SWF is intimacy. It is a timely exploration of what it means to connect with and draw inspiration from one another when safe distancing has become the norm due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We are called to reflect on the need for community and physical and emotional connection, as well as to envisage new ways to engage with one another. This year's festival experiments with new blended formats to overcome geographical boundaries and reach out to wider literary community and public. Over the past few months, we have witnessed changes on a global scale arising from the pandemic and its effect. The arts sector has been disrupted by COVID-19 measures. The Ministry of Culture, Community and Youth, MCCY, and the National Arts Council, NAC, are committed to see our arts community through this crisis. As part of the $55 million Arts and Culture Resilience Package, we introduced the Digitalization Fund to support our artists in digitalizing content for new projects and programs, including this year's SWF. We will continue to partner our community to pilot new, creative approaches for our arts and culture sector to overcome COVID-19 and emerge stronger. During these unsettling times, many of us have turned to the arts for much needed connection, inspiration, and comfort. The arts can help us make sense of our world, understand different perspectives, and uplift our spirits. Literature has the redemptive power to foster empathy, encourage cross-cultural dialogues, and build intimacy. This year's digital edition of SWF offers many different possibilities of appreciating and enjoying literature. The SWF team has worked hard to curate over 160 online programs with engaging and interactive content. They hope to connect participants in novel ways and help forge a sense of cohesion among our communities, despite the physical distance and differences between us. For example, in Dijinwal 1971, Hassan Hasari Ali's short story will be brought to life through an AR-enabled mobile phone application, allowing audiences to enjoy literature in a hyper-real setting. In another novel participatory format, participants in a call away will receive a package of items and will be guided to explore these items through a phone call. Inspired by poet Alvin Pang's What Gives Us Our Names, participants will experience an interesting blend of sounds and stories as they open up the package and discover the items within. I had the opportunity to participate in a call away myself and was delighted by the intimate connections formed through this short session. These kinds of shared experiences bring SWF participants closer together. This year's festival also honors the legacy of our pioneers through the Literary Pioneer Series presented by the Arts House. We will be celebrating the life and work of 3 seminal Tamil writers and cultural medallion recipients, P. Krishnan, Ma Ilankanan, and Rama Kanabiran, through an interactive and multi-sensory digital exhibition in both English and Tamil. In the exhibition, young Tamil writers Harini V, Ashwini Salvaraj, and Bharati Motiapan unearth stories of Singapore's Indian community from the Second World War to the years of industrialization and urbanization in the 1970s and 1980s. The grit and passion of our Tamil pioneers and their rich contributions to our cultural legacy remind us of our shared past and the values which have seen us through to today. They give us confidence that we will overcome the challenges of this pandemic if we stand together. Other festival highlights include the SWF Playground programs, which provide budding young writers with opportunities to learn from established authors and artists. There are also youth fringe programs co-curated by youth themselves and the Singapore Book Council. We must continue to engage our youth, who will be the next generation of practitioners, supporters, and patrons of the arts. I am glad that SWF's programs are inclusive and cater to a multi-generational audience, promoting the accessibility of the arts to all. Reflecting Singapore's multicultural heritage, SWF is one of the few multilingual festivals in the world that celebrate writers and their literary works drawn from English, Malay, Chinese, and Tamil, Singapore's 4 official languages. As a global hub, SWF also features international writers in various languages, such as Korean, Tagalog, Bengali, and Russian. For these works, English translation or interpretation will be provided so that more people can enjoy this literary feast. In conclusion, I would like to thank Festival Director Pooja Nansi and the SWF team for making this year's festival possible and putting together an exciting lineup of programs despite current constraints. I wish everyone an inspiring time at SWF. I hope you will walk away with new insights and connections. Thank you and have a good evening.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Singapore Writers Festival 2020, an all-digital edition of what promises to be a most unusual and perhaps very intimate affair. My name is Mrigaa. Under normal circumstances, this is the part of proceedings where we would have a very formal, very long speech by the festival director. We're not going to do that this time. This time, we have a cross-legged chat with my dear friend and festival director, Pooja Nansi.
Hi Mrigaa.
Hi Pooja, how are you doing?
I'm okay.
What shall I ask you first? Let's start with how you're feeling.
I'm feeling great. I think it's been a bit of a strange year all around for all of us. So I think like in terms of the festival, I think we started out planning a physical edition like we have every year. And then I think when the pandemic hit, in like about February when things started shutting down, we quickly realized that we might need a contingency of sorts. And by April, it was pretty clear that we would have to go digital. And so I think that kind of like made the whole team galvanize and like reconceptualize the festival. And so yeah, here we are with a whole digital edition that it feels like we've been working on for as long as 2020 has felt.
What were some of those conversations like? I just can't imagine how such a big festival that has such a well-documented history, a program, a tradition. What were those meetings like when you had to just take it all apart and put it back together?
So I think what was additionally weird was that because the circuit breakers happened just before we decided that we had to go digital. So we were already like physically separated as a festival team. So we were having these conversations about going digital like without being in the same room together. And it was this really strange disembodied experience. But I think we very quickly understood that we couldn't just translate physical programs digitally. Like it would be really quite boring. And so, yeah, one of the things that we had to really think about was just what possibilities like the digital sphere offered us with literary programming. You know, what could we do differently? What was it that we might struggle to do? I think those were the initial conversations. It was also very clear that we couldn't just map what we had planned for the physical festival like cleanly onto the digital festival. So actually we had to like rehaul our theme. And then I picked intimacy because I was thinking about social distancing and just how everyone was being forced to like wash our hands and not touch each other, and like it felt like this weird lonely experience. But then like the whole world was also kind of opening up digitally because we were getting so connected to other literary events or getting access to things that we otherwise wouldn't. And so I just thought that that might be an interesting tension to explore. So that's like how the conversation started.
One of the things that remained the same is the big name headliners. So you recently revealed those names, and I wonder why you chose them. On one hand, I can appreciate that there's kind of this precedent that, who are the headliners this year at SWF? How did you pick these particular ones?
We always bring in strong international names, and then we also always balance that with like a strong focus on Singaporean writers and regional writers. With our international headliners this year, I think there were some names that we've been wanting for years, and so we just keep pursuing them. And it was also just kind of going to names that we knew would add to the conversation around intimacy. So for example, with Zadie Smith, like she has a very current collection of essays called Intimations, which she wrote during the pandemic. So it just seemed like someone urgent to have on the festival who really had her writing really was on the pulse of what's happening in the world. Sharon Olds, I'm just a huge fan because the poet in me just loves her, and she's a bit older, and I think like it's harder for her to travel long distances, so this was also a great time for us to kind of just like politely urge her to appear in the intimacy of her bedroom and talk to us. So there were different I think different kind of things that we were taking into consideration with different names.
And her work is particularly domestic and housebound
in
a way.
Yes. And she talks about all these like very lovely, beautiful, intimate moments in relationships. So yeah.
The other part of the program that I'm super excited about is the 20 digital commissions.
Commissions, yeah.
Can you tell me a bit more about that?
So with that, I think last year we started, in my first year as festival director, we put out an open call to just the literary and the wider arts community in Singapore to just say, we're excited to hear about like any potential program contributions you have for the festival. So we did the same thing this year, but knowing that we had to work digitally, we kind of asked if people had ideas for programs that would be innovative or would do something exciting or different with literary texts online.
You didn't want 150 Zoom calls?
No. We only have 120.
Okay.
Yeah, so
very restrained.
Very restrained. But so we got some really cool ideas. So for example, we've got lots of we've got a play like a choose your own adventure game that unfolds that's based on like Singaporean literature. We've got kind of people going analog as well, which was really cool. So like there's a commission called what is it called, Sherry? Play This Story, yeah. There's a commission called, Sherry's sitting right here, she's giving me information because I can't remember 130 programs. But yes, it's called Play This Story, which unfolds over email. So like you email this kind of story center, and like every time you make a choice, you get a response. We've also got people just using like the telephone and phone calls and packages that they send to you when you sign up, that you play with. So it was really cool because it was kind of like stories coming alive in a way, like online, but also in your life. Lots of people exploring like AR and VR elements. So yeah, that's been really exciting to see.
You'd also said that the festival aims to explore mental health and community building and topics like that. Can you say more about why that was particularly important?
I think the idea of mental health kept coming up in a lot of our conversations with partners and with commissions because there's been something just really weird about this year. Like we've all just been stuck in our bubbles. And stuck at home, and it's been such an odd experience for so many of us. I think we all went like 3 weeks without seeing anyone except our like immediate family members, and that does take a toll on like your mental health. It takes a toll on like depending on your support structures, what that experience of staying at home has been like. Like for some people it was really peaceful, for other people it was really lonely. So we have one particular commission called Sit With Me, done by the Tapestry Project, which is an online kind of mental health publication. So they've kind of worked with 20, I think, different authors whose stories unfold during COVID-19 and talk about their mental health, and each story is metaphorically represented by a different chair that they sat on during the lockdown. So I thought that was a really cool way of exploring personal narratives and very intimate narratives. And then our youth curators brought up the idea of mental health as well, and how many of them were affected with having to do like home-based learning and just the stresses that brought on them, and just kind of having to communicate constantly via screens, which I thought was surprising because young people do that all the time. But I think when the option is taken away from you, it kind of forces you to rethink, human interaction.
Yeah, in my own experience, I think the great irony of the screen or communicating through the screen is that it's been both really isolating but also really connecting.
Yeah.
Before COVID, it seemed like lying in bed and texting someone late at night was a hugely intimate thing to do.
Yeah.
And now that it's the only thing we can do, or was the only thing we could do for a long time, that it was not enough.
Not enough, yeah. And so like I was also very excited by our key visual this year because it's like two hands on a screen, and it's done by this wonderful artist named Eric Fernanda. And I think, he very quickly talked about the idea of hands being a very important part of the key visual, because I think with COVID, like hands just became such a thing. Like it was like wash your hands, or like, you're always texting, and like using the screen or typing was the only way that we could connect with people. And it's exactly what you said, which was like the screen became the thing that you could connect with, but it was also the thing that kept you apart. So I think like a lot of the programming in the festival just tries to kind of explore that weird tension and that weird space.
Yeah, it's a really compelling. I saw it was like a 10-second visual of the hands sort of doing this, and it's kind of encapsulated the whole feeling. It did it very well. Tell me more about coming up with that theme of intimacy, because on one hand, it's intimacy between people, but this being a writers' festival, there's also a kind of intimacy with the self in order to be a reader or be a writer or be a reader reading a writer.
Yeah, for sure. I guess I'm going to ask you a question. How did you feel about reading during the lockdown? Or like the circuit breaker? Like when you had all that time at home, did you feel like you were reading more or reading less?
Oddly, I think I was reading less.
Right? And so me too. Like I found it really difficult to focus on books, and I felt like it was really hard to read, to just sit down and have that reading experience. And so like that also got me thinking about like what's the role of like writing or reading in a time like the one that we've gone through this year. But then I realized that maybe like the act of reading and writing had shifted. It's like what you said, right? It's like we were reading other people's stories from around the world and even in Singapore, not necessarily fiction, but we were really just turning to what was happening in other people's lives.
There was a great podcast with Cheryl Strayed, who reprised her podcast and called it Sugar Calling, because she had that podcast called Dear Sugar. And she spoke to the author George Saunders, and he read this amazing letter that he had sent to his undergrads when school shut down for COVID. And one of the things he reminded them to do was to keep writing and keep recording
what was happening,
even if you can't make sense of what's happening, just keep writing it for later.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm so impressed with Zadie Smith for having actually produced a publishable book.
I know, right?
Of thoughts about the pandemic, during the pandemic.
I know. Because it's like, for me, like, what's astounding about the ability to do that is that, like, I feel like I need to process things for a while before I can write them. But to kind of write about it when you're in it is pretty amazing. Yeah.
What would you say about intimacy with the self? Because that's the other way I can look at this theme. Yeah,
I think I was listening to a lot more music. really mindfully listening to music, because I couldn't bring myself to read. And like, I know you were listening to a lot of podcasts, but I found that difficult as well. So I was just really putting on music that I loved and just listening to it. For like an hour, I would just listen to songs. And I found myself kind of like at my own pace accessing kind of different programs, because there was also a point in time where there was a real influx of digital like readings and programs just available to us, and like, you know, the arts world had just like everything was online and free and accessible, and even that, like, that choice felt overwhelming. And I think what helped was just kind of taking my time with it, because that's also the joy of like being in the digital space. You know, you don't have to access everything when it's happening. You can kind of save that for later.
So actually, taking it back to the festival, this idea of there being an onslaught of digital content out there, especially in the arts and literature, are you worried at all about adding to that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the fact that like the festival happens towards the end of a year of, you know, so much digital content, there was a definite concern about digital fatigue. But then when I talk to people in the writing community, because writers are so kind of introverted anyway, a lot of us seem very happy to be able to like access things without having to you know, socialize with people. And on the flip side, I think is also what some of us are really going to miss this year, and it's inevitable, is just being on the festival grounds. The bookstore. We have a great bookstore this year, though. It's online, but please support it. It's going to hold all the titles at the festival, but yeah, you kind of miss that browsing experience, or just bumping into someone that you know, or like kind of talking about a panel after it's done, and being like blown away by it, or thinking that like the speaker was completely irrelevant, and, you know, kind of gossiping about it in the bathroom. Like, that's also just part of the festival experience. So I think those are things we're going to deeply miss. But they also remind us like what's precious about literary spaces that are live, and the hope that we can come back to that sooner rather than later. Yeah, so I think I'm not too worried, because I think we'll provide enough options for people to explore things that speak to them, and I'm hoping people can have little watch parties, you know, so you can experience the festival in your pajamas while eating instant noodles. Yeah.
And there you have it, folks. Pooja Nansi, Festival Director, wants you to enjoy it in your pajamas. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mrigaa.
Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Yeah, for sure. I just want to thank all of you for staying through this festival, and I hope you all experience something that you deeply enjoy and you find something new to explore. I also really want to thank our partners and sponsors who have made this possible, and a big shout out to my festival team who's worked incredibly hard to make this happen, and to NAC for their help in organizing the festival.
Stick around tonight for some previews of upcoming programs, and continue exploring over the next 10 days. See you online.
A letter to my unborn son. My imagination alone brought you to life. Today I wonder if your life is better than mine, if the years between us have been, will be kind. Are you the same boy I was long ago? Do you hear, as I did, the sounds of passing birds on your way home from school? Will you ever know that a man who yearns to return to his past has never left his boyhood behind? I should tell you that I always saw myself as lost. I often flung myself into the abyss between joy and despair, hoping to recover for myself some hope for the future. If you could only see me now, you would know I'm stronger for having penned this letter. It is the only way I could reach you. It is all I could manage. How strange that sons and fathers can be bound forever. The blame is all mine, and my fault I freely give to you. Perhaps you have longed for my love. Why would you shun it now? Here is a seeming kiss. Burn it if you wish. Take this apology as kindling for your fury.
Hi Aaron,
Hi Mark,
welcome to Poetry Bites.
thanks so much.
Could we start by having you summarize your poem for us in a couple of lines?
Sure. I guess you could see the poem as an epistolary poem on father-son relationships, in which I sort of go in search of deeper meanings around this theme, relating to generational gaps, in society, in culture, and even in literary ideas.
So, could you tell me what's the significance of the line, "A man who yearns to return to his past has never left his boyhood behind"?
I guess this line expresses the maturing poet's deep realization that sometimes or often we tend to hold on to pieces of the past while waiting for the future. Nostalgia is a strange thing. It's more yearning than remembering. It is illusory, and yet it cannot be appeased. It's a sensation that we like to indulge in, but it sometimes holds us back from being truly present and even being ready for what the future may hold. And this is an idea that I deal with and address many times over the years in my body of poetry writing.
Nostalgia as indulgence, I really like that. And perhaps that could make us weaker in a way.
Yeah.
But to come back to the poem, how does the act of penning this letter make the speaker stronger?
So I think penning this letter as a poem was a very personal process for me. A kind of what Robert Frost calls a crystallization or an overflow of thoughts and emotion.
And there are so many lines that I love in this poem. And here's another one. "It is the only way I could reach you." So maybe taking a step back to think about poetry, what do you think is the role of poetry in responding to states of great emotional upheaval?
In a very real sense, life is about the stories that we tell ourselves. And I think there's a writer, Nassim Taleb, who said very succinctly, ideas come and go, but stories stay. Poetry, though, is about what is deeply felt and trying to say the unsayable. And when people are in a great state of emotional upheaval, as you phrased it, I think we can look to poetry, first of all, as words that come from a place of deep empathy, shared experience, shared understanding, and that happens because I think a poem, if it's well done, allows us to slip helplessly into someone else's skin, and then we can call forth from the drama of the heart a deeply humane response. And I do find this a rather ironic thought, that poetry is done with words, and yet it is trying to reach into a place that poetry that lies beyond words.
The last line of your poem, "Take this apology as kindling for your fury," seems a rather dark way to end the poem. To me, it intimates a sense of guilt or failure on the part of the speaker. Could you maybe tell me a bit more about that?
I mean, the truth is, though, it is simply part of life for us to accumulate regrets over the course of the years. I've lived long enough to know that acknowledging brokenness and pain, apologizing, asking for forgiveness from God or from others and even from yourself is the only way for us to start to heal and then to move forward.
So not to end this on too dark a note, I want to actually go all the way back to the first line of the poem, which is very simple, but it's also very arresting. My imagination alone brought you to life. So how does wonder figure broadly in your poetry?
Not to be corny, but wonder, I love that word. Wonder is a wonderful word. There is a wise saying by a poet philosopher called Edward Young, who said this, wonder is involuntary praise. Wonder is involuntary praise. And I found in my writing, which is among other things a spiritual discipline, has become over the years deepened with a sense of wonder and praise. Life is complex, it's confusing, sometimes it's inexpressibly difficult. In my book, Coastlands, I have a poem which contains the line, "It was evening and the hills were scarlet with wonder." And I do believe that grief and joy are twin sides of the same bright coin that daily life is. And we don't take it for granted, and what keeps me going is really the age-old trinity of faith, love, and hope. I try to discover and recover these truths every day, these gifts every day in my writing.
Poetry Bites.
Kepedihan menjala, deras dan serap, menikam daging merah dan tulang-tulang tegap, melebur rasanya bagai belerang gunung api di lambung gempa dan mengoyak kulit bumi. Beku darahku, keluh lidahku, dan terpaku mata, basah pipiku kedua-dua. Kita berjauh rupanya. Baru semalam berkeluarga. Tidakkah bercakar dada dan menguris hati bercinta? Oh Tuhan, kami manusia bercinta, berikan keindahan di mana semua manusia gembira. Cerahnya wajah Dara berdendang sayang. Pada hatinya sudah bertunas sinar cermelang. Ingin membuai menarik harapan segera dari diri yang lain, merenung mega di angkasa. Mega ke timur juga arahnya. Tiada pesan, jadikan harapan nyata. Akan berlanjutlah renungan hati berjauhan. Belum pasti Mega putih datang berdendang. Kalau nanti tiada tersua, Mega putih jadikan tanda tempat harapan yang selalu diragu, dan mudah-mudahan jadi panduan yang baru.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Insiders Chat with Nyshka, Ashley and myself. Ashley and myself are the production team behind radio station Night Spin 182.7. We have Nyshka with us, who is helping us curate a bunch of programs titled Shades of Self, which are an exploration into intimacy and isolation, and their chats with a whole bunch of creatives.
That's right.
Hi guys. Hello.
Hi, hello. Good morning and good night to Nyshka, who's based all the way in Canada. So thank you for doing this.
Cross-cultural time zones here. Guys, throughout this whole process of
helping you guys organize the show. It's been so interesting to learn what intimacy means to all of the different people that we've interviewed. I have just been doing Shades of Self. You guys have been producing so many other segments of the show, and they all deal with creatives, isolation, intimacy, how people have been working. Why don't you tell us through all the different segments that you've planned for Singapore Writers Festival this year?
So Nightspin runs every day from 8 to 11 p.m. and there's a whole bunch of programs that are programmed by the Arts House as well as Mama Magnet, and together we form the Singapore Writers Festival radio station. So broadly, we're covering issues and topics within 3 categories. Raw, which is like uncovering very vulnerable stories of people. It's a common theme running through the programs under this raw category is music, because we feel like being a radio station, music is a way to connect people. For second category is stories/drama. There's a whole bunch of programs such as radio plays within this category. We have Greek Women Project with Edith Podesta. And the third category, which Ashley and I are the most excited about, is mysticism, where we're exploring like the unseen, and especially like living in a time of uncertainty. What do millennials do? What do different generations do to like hold on to something bigger than themselves, and like how do they hold on to this power to get by, essentially? So we're working with Mrigaa Sethi, who is a writer, and she's co-curating a bunch of programs within this category. They're all very aptly titled "No Magic Here." She's interviewing C.A. Conrad, who is a super interesting poet who does a lot of rituals. She's also talking to Zarina Muhammad as part of a panel, who's a visual artist as well as a performer. And we also have a live session with a tarot card reader and a drag queen, Becca de Bus, hosting the session. So this will be happening on the 5th of November.
And plus one more, which is Malam Seram. So for those of you who enjoyed listening to Ria as a child, there is a horror story like segment that comes off at the strike of midnight. So it's really scary. I'm super excited for that as well.
Wow.
And that's coming out from the Arts House. So
and it's been so interesting hearing how this whole thing has come together. And, you know, when we talk about radio culture in the year of the pandemic, so many different projects around the world are popping up because, Ash, like you say, radio itself is so intimate, right? We just have the voice. The idea of building these podcasts is, you know, it's a form of storytelling.
Yeah, I mean, think about this, like the voice in your head, you're getting it out for your mouth. So it feels like isolation has happened for the longest time. And it is the art of storytelling, because I think before TV came about, it was always radio waves, and it's the only thing that we can depend on for the longest time. So now we're taking the internet and we're also taking something traditional and then morphing it together and then presenting this to you. I mean, all the technical things aside and whatnot, like it's been actually really fun to have modernization of like technology to help us produce these programs even better, like over Zoom. So you're not here in Singapore. Tulika and I are obviously separated, isolated, but we can always do this over Zoom and we're chatting. Yes, there will be latency issues and whatnot, but you always find a way to make things work. Now, I have a question for you. So Nyshka, she's actually hosting and moderating Shades of Self, which is one of the programs in Raw. Do you prefer written interviews or face-to-face interviews? Like, do you have a preference, or do you think it has its pros and cons? Like, let's find out.
I always prefer live interviews because, you know, there's nothing like being in front of a person, seeing their body language, looking at their facial expressions. You know, live interviews are obviously, the only downside is the transcribing involved afterwards, compared to, let's say, an email interview. But, you know, it all depends on the person. Some people are more comfortable behind a screen and they're able to be more honest and maybe share more details that they would otherwise feel shy to, you know, in a face-to-face chat. So it's been nice that we have the technology of Zoom. And I think it's also funny how we've gone back to basics. We've gone back to this ancient art of storytelling, which is radio.
Yeah.
But we're using it, you know, for our ways. That's
How is your experience doing radio for this project, Nyshka?
it's really fun. Like Ashley, I've always been such a fan of radio culture, whether it's online music stations or even podcasts. There is a style of, I think, talking on radio that's very different to being on TV or, other forms of media. So it's been fun for me. I've learned a lot, and I've learned a lot through Ashley, actually. She's been a great sidekick to have, and encouraging me to do this. I think what I've learned through the Shades of Self episode, which is where we talk to various creatives in Singapore and beyond. Some of our guests include, the Singaporean actor Rizman Putra, the artist Mojoko, aka Steve Lawler. Talking to these interesting people and seeing how they've kind of adapted to the pandemic in their own way. Some people haven't been working, some people have been taking this time to just kind of chill and get back to themselves, which I think is interesting. Other people like Mrigaa, who's another one of our guests on Shades of Self, she's just been going for it nonstop. So it's funny.
And plus you get to take a sneak peek into their, personal playlist, which is going to present you such layers, and everyone has different layers. It's very subjective, and sometimes we don't know, like someone is doing such intense topics, and then immediately when you hear their playlist, you're like, oh, you're so soft and so nice and like so poppy or something.
Shades
like
of the Self.
Yeah, there's so many layers to it, and I love it. I love the complexity of like being a human being, especially in a time right now. You get to see a lot of, I wouldn't say true colors, but you just get to see true humanity.
Because it's such a simple formula, right? Like you chat with a person and then you ask them what they're listening to. What was the thinking behind it?
The one thing I didn't like growing up listening to radio is the long talks though. Honestly, like the conversations go on so long. And I'm like, where is the songs? Especially on Go 90.5. It's one of my favorite radio stations. But the talking will go on for so long, so I wanted to just keep a simple balanced formula of like chat music, something a little bit uplifting as well. But I don't know how to explain that, but I guess it is what it is, because everyone has their way of doing radio as well. And
that's right.
When I grew up, I was like, you know what, why don't I do it my way? And after listening to all of like our guests who got interviewed by Nyshka, I was like, I guess I'll do it my way then. I feel more confident because I'm still growing. I think my style might change, but I'm not sure. But I'm happy. Like this is it for now. So that's the formula, I guess. Tulika, so like how has it been? Like, cause you worked with visual artists before, and like, am I wrong to say that this is your first time like doing like a full on like production for radio?
Yeah, for sure. A lot of firsts in this project. The initial idea was actually, if the festival was going to be physical, to build a structure within the arts house, where there's a live radio station, so we could even interview like festival goers.
That's such a great idea. I hope that actually comes to light maybe next year or the year after that.
Yeah, hopefully.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, but together with Ashley, we had to adapt to the festival being digital. So we went with a microsite, and then we got an amazing experienced designer and interaction designer on board, and they're helping to build the whole website.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Throughout this pandemic, I've seen so many different kind of platforms use radio, right, to reconnect with their fans, whether it's like artists, whether it's networks of, industry people. When you guys were growing up, what kind of radio stations were in your life? I know Ashley mentioned her favorite channel in Singapore.
Gold 90.5. Sounds good, feels good. I know someone is saying that with me right now, yeah.
Like for me, as a kid, I think I was, my exposure to radio was just in Dubai. It was just the normal FM radio. But that was the start of my musical education, right? So radio always, I think no matter where you are in your life, whether you're a visual artist or you're a writer, everyone gets exposed to something. What was yours, Tulika?
I used to listen to a lot of 987, the Muttons at midnight. Like, I remember every evening after I finished dinner, finished my homework, me and my friends used to like listen to Muttons, sometimes send like SMSs or like call in.
Ooh, yeah. It's nice to be when the radio show calls up, when the host calls out your name, right? When you know that you're listening. it's there's a connection there.
Exactly.
Like, oh, you hear me.
Yeah, it's so fun.
Yeah, it's kind of true also. Like, I feel like radio has a equalizing power. Like, no matter where you're listening from, what kind of device you have to listen to radio, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and radio is amazing. I think now there's a lot of great internet radio stations as well. There's NTS. There's also the Lot Radio in New York, Brooklyn actually, sorry. But yeah, there's a lot of radio out there. Like I can say, like from Indonesia, especially like Padi Grooves, like Norm Radio. So many, and it's amazing selections of music. I mean, Nyshka, you would know how crazy it gets, like how colorful radio can be, right? Like how has it been for you? You know, like have you listened to anything? What are your favorites right now for radio?
For sure. I mean, a lot of my radio consumption is definitely music oriented. You know, I listen to all of those radio channels you've been putting out. One of my favorite radio projects to emerge this year is actually from Palestine. It's another online music radio station called Radio Al-Hara. They came about because of, you know, the socio-political climate in the Middle East, and even though it's about music, it's much more than that. You know, it's a chance for various thinkers around that region to kind of come together and go beyond music, maybe discuss politics, maybe discuss art, you know? So it's never just about the music, it's so much more. It's about creating this community where people can find like-minded individuals. But if they know that, you know, the video isn't being recorded, or if they know it's just audio, they're more comfortable to share things, right? So it's about lowering your barriers.
Yeah.
And so I'm really glad that all of the people we interviewed for Shades of Self, you know, they kind of lowered their guards down. They told us things about their creative process. They told us some episodes of stress, of anxiety. You know, this year has given everyone anxiety, I'm sure.
It's true, like radio gets people to get their guard down, like Nyshka said, but I think a lot of it also is on the person interviewing. The person has to make them feel comfortable, especially with a topic such as intimacy. So I'm really excited for everyone to hear Nyshka's interviews of 9 different creatives. And I think it's such an interesting documentary of the year that this has been.
Yes, yeah. Like Ashley, you were saying earlier, right? It's like a snapshot of this moment in time, right?
Yeah.
When I listen to like economics podcasts from years ago, some of those lessons are still very much relevant today, right? So I hope this capsule, you know, of 2020, creativity in the year of the pandemic, it's going to be a time capsule for people like 10 years later.
Oh, definitely.
Your audio stinger is exactly that. It's like Shades of Self, Shades of Self. This is a mystery.
Yeah, it was so fun.
Why don't you guys tell us how you chose all your guests for all the segments you've been doing?
It's just people that are in the scene. They're all doing very different things, and they're sort of creatives writing their own professions, but some of them are pioneers in that sense. Like no one else has done it before them with the amount of things that they're juggling and the kind of jobs that they've carved out for themselves. So we just thought it's worth a chat.
Yeah.
It's been nice to see. As someone who's looking in as an outsider, I've seen Singapore's creative community just kind of explode, you know, over the past 5-6 years. People are doing more things together, crews working alongside each other, which is really nice to see. You know, for such a small island, it's so easy to let small divisions get in the way, but thankfully that's not happening.
Yeah, definitely. I think we wanted this to be like I wouldn't say ode to Singapore, but like, you know, sometimes when you're working in the city, you don't really get to see yourself. There's not a mirror next to you 24/7. So, you know, when you take it out of context, especially away from written form sometimes, and put it into radio, it is almost like showing that this is a representation of local people here in Singapore, regardless of your nationality, you know, people working here and just contributing to the creative community here, you know. So we want people to see that and also feel a sense of like, I wouldn't say pride, but I want people to feel comfortable. Let's tell everyone what's the program like going to be for like the next 10 days.
Going to be a lot of different varied programs that invite you to listen. You can do other activities, wash your clothes, do the dishes, cook dinner. It's a low engagement sort of radio listening. And coming up next is Hook and I 1, which is first in a series of 4 radio plays by the Second Breakfast Company.
Exciting
Enjoy.
stuff. I can't wait.